Welcome back. We are joined today by Professor Jeffrey Sachs to discuss the threats now being made by Trump against Iran. So I'm very grateful you could come on because if you're sitting in Tehran, you're assessing threats. Essentially, you assess capabilities and intentions. Now, you would then see this massive accumulation of military force by the United States in the region. You would see the British, German, Spanish, Italians transport plane seemingly heading towards the Middle East. And in terms of intention, it seems that an attack is unavoidable. The Israelis want it, Washington wants it. It's speaking of regime change. And on social media, Trump writes that, quote, a massive armada is heading to Iran. It is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. He then goes on writing that time is running out. What do you make of these threats?
I think it's clear. Well, for Israel, this has been a 30-year effort to overthrow the Iranian government. The United States basically does what Israel says. And so Israel has been pulling the United States into war with Iran and attempting to do that endlessly. It did that last summer. The goal was to create regime change, to have an overthrow. That didn't work. The U.S. then has been using economic instruments, what our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called economic statecraft, but he laid out the deliberate measures by the United States to destroy the Iranian economy. The idea, again, was regime change. That didn't work. And so now we have a carrier task group, strike group on its way to attack Iran. So an attack is imminent, I think. The goal here has never been negotiation. Whenever there has been negotiation, Israel has jumped up and down saying, don't negotiate. Of course, a nuclear agreement was reached with Iran a decade ago. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA. It was actually ratified by the UN Security Council Resolution 2231 on the 20th of July, 2015. Then Trump ripped it up in his first term. So there's never been any desire by Israel to have a negotiated settlement. And since the United States does what Israel tells it to do, there has never been a readiness of the United States to have real negotiations with Iran. And Trump proved that again last summer, because we can recall that when Israel, with U.S. support, bombed Iran, which was on the 12th and 13th of June, 2025. That was 2 days before scheduled negotiations between the United States and Iran. So this whole idea that this is about Iran negotiating is phony. This is a regime change operation that's being carried out through hybrid warfare, meaning you try cyber warfare, you try street unrest, you try crushing the economy, and you try bombing, you try assassinations. They're trying in every which way to overthrow this government. And Trump, being Trump, blasts this out. That, well, if you don't do what we say, this is like Venezuela. What does it say? This fleet is ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. You know, it's pure thuggery. People should understand, under the UN Charter, which Trump's deputy chief of staff called a nicety. It happens to be the international law, not for the gangsters in the White House, but for the rest of humanity. It says under Article 2, Section 4, all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the United Nations. So this is where we are right now, Glenn. I think, of course, we just went through this with Venezuela, brazen, gross threats followed by an invasion, a kidnapping of the president and the first lady, and a claim by the United States that it runs Venezuela, including stealing oil off of tankers and sending that to the United States, with Donald Trump declaring that the money goes to him. So this kind of brazenness and lawlessness is part of our scene right now, but Iran is vastly more dangerous for the world, and still waiting for a European country to say boo about it, to say something, oh, maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't have a war. Maybe we should obey the UN Charter. The question for Europe is, does it only speak up when the United States is about to attack Europe, or does Europe have any principles at all? And we're going to find out in the next few days.
Chancellor Merz, who said during the first attack on Iran that Israel is doing our dirty work, has now said that Iran's days are numbered. It may be weeks, but this regime has no legitimacy whatsoever to govern. So I think
Wow.
the Europeans are jumping on board on this fully. But
Wow.
Trump also said that well, now it's time. Now it's time for Iran to make a deal, otherwise we'll hit them hard. What deal is he referring to? We're still back at the nuclear deal? Because this seems very dishonest at this point, because they've already been very open that the goal is regime change. And any regime change, you wouldn't be able to get a unifying opposition. So this is the destruction of Iran we're looking at, which is...
That is correct. There is no interest in any negotiated deal, because negotiated deals have been available for more than a dozen years. And whenever they've been reached, the United States has ripped them up. And Israel has been the chief proponent of ripping up any negotiated deal. And since Trump works for Israel, there's absolutely no intention of any negotiation at all. They are out to overthrow the government. Shame on Merz, but again, it's just so typical. I had not seen that statement before. The thuggishness of Europe shouldn't surprise me, but it always disappoints me. The only attempt ever to rally to principles, it seems, is when Europe's own narrow interest is on the line. Then suddenly it's not right for the U.S. to attack Denmark by claiming Greenland. That would be an abuse. But overthrowing the government of Iran, that is fine. I think it's worth us spending just a few minutes on the propaganda that is now flowing freely in the New York Times, the Washington Post, I'm sure in the European media, that the economic collapse shows the corruption and mismanagement of the Iranian regime, and why they're not fit to govern, like Chancellor Merz has just declared, as you read to me. And people should understand this is part of the game. And the game is absolutely vulgar, but it is perfectly understandable if one directs just a little bit of attention to it. And it happens that our Treasury Secretary in the United States, Scott Bessent, laid it out very clearly and explicitly in Davos, almost in a cartoonish way. And if I may, Glenn, just to read his words so that people understand what has been happening during the past year. He's asked by the interviewer, What do you want to say about sanctions? Something else you've been working on, of course. What are you planning there in terms of Iran and the impact there? And Besant says, okay, there are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believed the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran. And it's worked, because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports. And this is why the people took to the streets. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here. It's an amazing statement. So amazing that the New York Times didn't dare to report it. The Washington Post didn't dare to report it. Because what Besant is explaining is that the United States has used its financial means to bring down the government, to bring people out on the streets, to bring mass unrest. And things are going in a very positive way, says Mr. Besant. So the vulgarity of it is so stunning that, of course, the mainstream media won't even touch it. But what they do is run stories every day about the mismanagement, the corruption, the economic collapse, the suffering of the people, without saying that our Treasury Secretary explained that's the American game. And I have spoken to people recently explaining, yes, they cannot get paid for their oil because of what the United States is doing. The payments don't come. Everybody's under sanctions. Everybody's under threat. Every bank in the world refuses to handle any of the transactions. That's the U.S. weaponization of the dollar. And the design is to create chaos, to create bank failures, to create a currency collapse, to bring people out on the streets. As Besant says, this is why the people took to the streets. So he even gives the chain of causation and blesses it. It's moving in a very positive way here. Okay, if this is the kind of world that people think we're going to be safe in, I'm sorry to say they're going to find that this is the absolute route to annihilation and disaster. This is pure gangsterism against every principle. And why Merz is a party to the gangsterism, or the Europeans are a party to the gangsterism, beats the hell out of me, I have to say, because they were also parties to the negotiation of the JCPOA. And they watched how the United States killed it. So they know the truth, but they don't speak the truth.
Well, this is the overwhelming propaganda, because you can have all the evidence in front of you. You can have Besant sitting there, as he does, say this is how we're going to destabilize, or how we did destabilize Iran. That has caused an economic problem. This will drive people to the street. You have Mike Pompeo saying, well, in the street, they're among the rioters. We have Mossad agents on, if you turn on the Israeli news, they explain that they're pumping weapons into this to fuel the violence among the riots. And, I was in a debate about what's happened in Iran. And because I didn't say that this was, a completely organic movement without any Western interference, it meant that I do not care about the suffering of Iranians, and I'm a regime apologist. So if you really care about Iranians, you will advocate for the bombing of it. I mean, this is how perverse, but this is with all wars. If you care about the Syrians, you would call for the toppling of Assad. If you care about Ukrainians, you would keep the war going forever. It's just, it's so vile.
Yes,
But
but what's interesting is that if you care for the Iranians, then you might pay attention to what Besant himself said, which is that they're out to hurt the Iranians. That's the goal, to hurt them so much that people pour out to the streets. And then when it happens, and there's violence and so forth, and much of it false flags and stoked by provocateurs and by Mossad and so forth, then Besant says it's moving in a very positive way here. By the way, he had a little smirk on his face. He could not resist the smirk as he finished that last sentence. It was just an added touch of vulgarity. People should understand who Besant is, by the way. He's our Treasury Secretary. You might think that this means he knows something about the macroeconomy, or that he knows about fiscal policy, or he's a tax policy expert. No, it has nothing to do with that. He is a hedge fund operator whose claim to fame is working with George Soros to destroy the British pound more than a decade ago. And that's what brought him when the pound was attacked, in the 1992, I guess it is. That's his credentials. Here's a man who can destroy currencies. So this is so vile and flagrant that again, it's not worth reporting.
Well, when the Treasury Secretary is a economic hitman, you should be worried, especially
Yes.
Trump's behind the wheel. Let me just ask, though, about the possibility of this war actually spreading, because it seems that both what the US side is aiming for, as well as what the Iranians are indicating, is this will be very different from the former war, that this is essentially all or nothing. So how likely do you think that this can be contained to the region? Because Iran's been already saying that anyone who participates they will retaliate against. And then you had Saudi Arabia saying, well, our airspace won't be used. So they take it serious. But do you think this will be contained? Because this is going to be very different, I think, from the previous war.
I think we learned, again, I'm not a military expert, but from what I gather, we have learned a few things. One is that Iran can penetrate Israeli air defenses. And I think they clearly demonstrated that they have hypersonic missiles that can do that. They did not aim them at highly sensitive targets the first time. In a war that is existential, they will aim them at highly sensitive targets. So this is one thing that I think will be very, very different. They are prepared for that. A second thing we learned is that the strikes on the nuclear facilities obviously did not end or perhaps even hinder Iran's path to nuclear weapons if they want that path. The amount of enrichment that they would have to carry out to take their current enriched uranium to the levels for an atomic bomb, or several of them, in fact, is not much. And so if this became an existential struggle, Iran could, I think, absolutely, without question, make a dash for nuclear weapons. They have said, and they have said credibly, we don't want that. We want the IAEA here to monitor. We will keep stringent limits on any kind of enrichment processing. But that's what the United States ripped up already a decade ago when Trump came in his first term. So the next point is that Iran themselves, and especially I think the Revolutionary Guard, could decide this is the fate of our nation, and we make a dash for nuclear weapons. If the situation became dire for Iran, I assume that other countries would support Iran. Iran is a big country. It is, of course, Israel tried through assassinations and through Mossad attacks and through the bombing a decapitation strike. It did not work. I don't believe it would work. And so this could be quite the prelude to a greatly expanded war. This is not Venezuela in America's backyard. This is would be a war in the most explosive region of the world, with plenty of nuclear-armed countries all around here, and with significant stakes in what would be happening. So I think it would be completely reckless and potentially globally ruinous, and so it should be prevented now before we have to speculate about how it's going to end. And again, I'm just dismayed to hear the German view of this. Not shocked, but dismayed. If we don't have countries in the world that are ready anymore to say you cannot launch wars like this in these explosive regions, completely against every principle that we have of the UN system, the chance for utter wreckage is very, very high. I believe the UN Security Council should be forced to meet immediately and stay in meetings and take its responsibility, which is unique in the world, to stop this and to say clearly to the United States, to the President of the United States, no, you cannot even threaten that way, much less make an attack. The threat itself is a gross violation of the UN Charter.
Yeah, I fear that it can't be prevented anymore, though, if all these capabilities are built up, and the only way to avoid it, according to Trump, is a deal which essentially is non-existent. It's hard to see what else they can go for.
Yeah, Trump sometimes backs down if he faces really a wall of opposition. In fact, he often backs down. He hasn't faced that wall right now, but I wouldn't stop trying to create the wall of opposition up to the moment, and even after, but up to the moment where Trump recklessly pulls the trigger. It hasn't happened yet, and God help us, there must be someone in Europe that has a brain left that, if only you were in charge, Glenn, but there must be someone in power that has some minimal sense of responsibility for humanity. And there are many countries around the world that don't want this to happen. And interestingly, I firmly do believe that the Saudis don't want a war, that Qatar doesn't want a war, that the Emirates does not want a war, that Turkey does not want a war. Do they really want to be in another Israeli-created regional war that could escalate to full disaster? I don't think anybody wants that other than Israel and its vassal state, the United States.
Well, on that grim note, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on this, and I really hope, yeah, there will be pressure. I doubt from the Europeans, but ideally from some of the regional allies. So
Yes.
thank you very much.
Great to be with you, Glenn. Thanks.